Hello, Telesur English presents a new episode of China Now, our media's production that showcases the culture, technology, and politics of the Asian giant. In this first segment, we are going to start with China currents. A huge port opens in Peru, changing the history of Latin America. China launched Moon Sol bricks to the space. Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China received 40 orders at the Xihua Air Show and more. Let's see.
China Current is a weekly news talk show from China to the world. We cover viral news about China every week and also give you the newest updates on China's cutting-edge technologies. Let's get started.
Welcome to China Currents, your weekly news report on what's happening in China. I'm Lisa. In this episode, a huge port that will change the history of Latin America opened in Peru. 10 Chinese EV makers launched new models at Guangzhou Auto Show. China launched moon soil bricks to the space.
Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China receives 40 orders at Zhuhai Air Show.
The British Museum gets more stolen goods. First, let's look at how Latin America is running to wealth. On the 14th of November, the Chancay port, a joint venture between China and Peru, officially opened for business. And this holds revolutionary economic and political significance for Peru and Latin America. Economically, the opening of the Chancay port has led to a substantial reduction in both time and cost in deep water port along its Pacific coast. Goods from countries like Brazil, Colombia, and Peru must pass through the Panama Canal. However, the Panama Canal has a limited capacity for having only 32 cargo ships per day on average, and a significant portion of this traffic is occupied by US and European companies, which severely constrain South America's exports. Moreover, the canal has imposed insurance fees ranging from 60,000 to 200,000 USD per ship, which significantly drove up the export costs. In contrast, the Chancay port has direct access to the Pacific Ocean, and this reduced the time needed for ships to travel from Peru to China from 35 days to 23 days. With 4 docking sites and an annual capacity of 1.5 million TEUs, that's 20-foot equivalent units, the port can handle an extra 300 fully loaded cargo ships per year. This translates into an average daily export of over 40,000 tons of goods to China. With a depth of 17.8 meters, the Chancay port can hold ultra-large container ships carrying 18,000 TEUs, establishing itself as a vital transport hub and logistics center along South America's Pacific coast. According to reports from Chinese official media, this development is expected to save Peru over 20% in logistic costs, generating more than 4.5 billion USD in annual revenue and create over 8,000 jobs opportunities. China has also built a complementary road network for the Chancay port, such as a tunnel connecting the Andes Mountains to the Pan-American Highway. This allows goods from Brazil, Colombia, and Venezuela to quickly move from the Chancay port to any countries along the Pacific coast. The port is expected to increase the trade competitiveness of Latin America across the entire Pacific region. From a political perspective, the opening of the Chancay port is a major victory for the people of Latin America in resisting US hegemony, and signaling that Latin America is the US backyard is just a wishful thinking of the US politicians. However, the construction of the Chancay port was not without its challenges. Despite the continual support for its construction from former Peruvian president, the US has hyped up concerns about the port. In October 2023, the American think tank CSIS claimed that the US government was very concerned about Peru's national security. The Financial Times cited statements from General Laura Richardson, the US Southern Command, alleging that the Chancay port could definitely accommodate Chinese warships, suggesting that Peru could potentially be used by the Chinese Navy as a foothold in South America. In response to the objections from the United States, the Peruvian foreign minister pointed out that if the United States was concerned about China's growing presence in Peru, then the US should increase its own investments in Peru. The situation worsened on the 1st of January 2024 when the Peruvian National Port Administration announced that the exclusive operating rights granted to COSCO Shipping Group in 2021 were a mistake and should be revoked. This decision was based on the Peruvian Congress' view that the Port Administration did not have the power to grant the exclusive rights to companies. However, this exclusivity was crucial for attracting further investments from COSCO. If the contract was to be broken, COSCO would be held accountable to its investors, and the Peruvian government would likely face significant compensation claims. The Chancay Port project, which was intended to be a win-win for both China and Peru, was now at risk of becoming a lose-lose situation. Based on China's non-interference policy, this dilemma was left for the Peruvian people to resolve in their own terms. Fortunately, on the 13th of May, Peruvian Congress passed an amendment to the National Port System Law with a vote of 68 in favor, 24 against, and 4 abstentions, confirming the Port Authority's right to grant exclusive operating rights to companies. On the 24th of June, the Peruvian Congress announced that the government lawyer had formally requested the judge to dismiss the civil lawsuit against the Congress, legally safeguarding COSCO's exclusive operating rights over the Chancay port. This once again boosts confidence in investors associated with COSCO Shipping Group, allowing the Chancay port to finally proceed with its original plans. On the 14th of November, the opening of Chancay Port was officially announced by the leaders of China and Peru. A gateway from Latin America to Asia opened. However, according to a report by Bloomberg on the 16th, Mauricio Claver-Carron, an advisor to the transition team, was not pleased. He claimed that any product going through Chancay or any Chinese-owned or controlled port in the region should be subject to 60% tariff, as if the product was from China. In response, Chinese strategist Professor Wang Xiangsui pointed out that for the US to improve its economy, it needs to rely more on constructive means rather than just impose tariffs. The main reason US manufacturers have lost competitiveness and, in some cases, the ability to produce certain products is due to significant deindustrialization. The process resulted in a large number of technical workers and engineers leaving the workforce in the US. As a result, the US manufacturers cannot quickly rebuild the industrial supply chains and technical expertise needed to produce these products. Imposing tariffs on Chinese products will only make them more expensive overnight, ultimately driving up the cost of living for Americans. According to a CNBC report from 2021, the US bears over 90% of the cost associated with these tariffs on Chinese goods, which shows that Trump's tariff policies have hurt the US economy. Unfortunately, it appears that the Trump administration has yet to learn these lessons. This situation may also explain why Latin America is more inclined to see economic cooperation with China rather than the United States. Not only has the US government been unsuccessful in undermining the port, it has also failed to hinder Chinese EV manufacturers. On the 15th of November, the 22nd Guangzhou International Automobile Expedition kicked off. The 10-day event has drawn more than 80 automakers worldwide, showcasing a total of 1,171 vehicles. Among them are 68 global debuts and a remarkable 512 EVs. According to Time Finance, 22 new models were unveiled at this year's auto show, including 10 from domestic Chinese brands. The lineup features 9 gasoline cars, 10 EVs, and 9 hybrids. Notably, Chery's iCar V23, an all-electric SUV with a starting price of just $15,000, has secured over 31,000 orders in less than 24 hours after pre-sales opened. Meanwhile, Xiaomi made its debut with the high-performance electric car, Xiaomi SUV7 Ultra. In less than a year, this Chinese smartphone manufacturer has quickly risen from being just another newcomer in the EV market to a name to remember. On the 27th of October, its SU7 Ultra prototype lapped the Nürburgring in 6 minutes and 46 seconds, setting a record as the fastest 4-door car on the track. According to Road & Track, this time has surpassed the Porsche Taycan Turbo GT's record. Xiaomi CEO Lei Jun, who has recently gone viral on Chinese social media, media said that the new car would be faster than Tesla Model S Plaid. According to Reuters, Xiaomi's EV deliveries in China have reached 10,000 per month since June and hit more than 20,000 vehicles last month. Just a day before the auto show, Chinese Association of Automobile Manufacturers, CAAM, announced that the country's EV production has hit 10 million units for this year. This achievement comes against the backdrop of Western sanctions targeting Chinese-made EVs. Interestingly, the sector most heavily targeted by Western restrictions have instead become the fastest growing and most innovative in China's development. For instance, China's largest automaker, BYD, brought its 3 independent brands to the show. Last month, it released its financial results for the first 3 quarters of the year, reporting a total revenue of $70 billion, a 19% year-on-year increase. Notably, its revenue in the third quarter reached $28 billion, surpassing Tesla for the first time. Moreover, in September alone, BYD sold nearly 420,000 vehicles, equivalent to its total sales for the entire year of 2020. As Chinese electric vehicle sales skyrocketed, there are also good news from China's manned moon project. On the 15th of November, China launched the Tianzhou 8 cargo spacecraft. The supplies include various equipment and materials for scientific experiments. Notably, one of the experiments on this mission involves bricks made by China's moon soil. These bricks will undergo tests to assess their strength and durability in extreme environments and to observe how they perform in the vacuum of space. China plans to build its International Lunar Research Station in the 2030s. If these bricks prove suitable for construction buildings on the moon, China will be able to utilize local resources to assemble its lunar research station. This will greatly reduce the transport cost and emission of China's lunar base. Next up, let's move back inside the atmosphere. On the 17th of November, the 15th China International Aviation and Aerospace Expedition came to a successful close. China's homemade C919 passenger jet has once again captured the world's attention.
C919 is a narrow-body airliner developed by Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China, COMAC. After C919's flight demonstration, COMAC received 40 orders from Hainan Airlines.
Hainan Airlines was originally a loyal customer of Boeing, owning more than 118 Boeing-produced passenger aircraft, and this C919 order marks a historical turning point. This is largely related to Boeing's recent product quality problem and management scandals. On the 8th of January 2024, a door plug blew out of Boeing's 737 MAX 9. Several U.S. airlines have also found loose screws later in their purchased or leased Boeing aircraft. Similarly, safety concerns were identified even on the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's Boeing aircraft. In Boeing's newly delivered carriers to government clients, tools, trash, and even empty tequila bottles were shockingly discovered. According to a disclosure by China Eastern Airlines, the published price for the C919 is $99 million, or approximately 653 million yuan. This makes it more affordable than similar aircraft like the Airbus A320 and Boeing 737 MAX, which cost over $100 million. In terms of performance, the C919 is more fuel efficient than the Boeing 737 and Airbus A320, which will also save the airline a significant amount of money in the long run. More importantly, in China, people responsible for the safety of the C919 can be held accountable for their actions, in contrast to Boeing whistleblower John Barnett and Joshua Dean, who raised concerns about the company, died in 2024 after speaking out. If Boeing doesn't respond convincingly, we'll see more Chinese airlines make the same choices as Hainan Airlines. Moving on, the British Museum also lacks self-reflection. On the 13th of November, the British Museum received a donation of approximately 1,700 Chinese ceramics from the David Foundation, a private British museum. The collection includes highly significant pieces associated with the Ming Dynasty's Chenhua Emperor. The David Foundation's founder acquired these artifacts in the early 20th century when the Eight-Nation Alliance invaded China, burning and looting the royal palace in Beijing. Therefore, for China, these artifacts symbolize a historical injustice that remains unresolved. In addition, the British Museum's professionalism is also doubtful. A former museum employee recently told The Independent that security measures in storage areas are shockingly inadequate, with no effective oversight for the movement of items. Over the years, there have been frequent burglaries at the British Museum. Ancient Roman coins vanished in 1993. A 2,500-year-old Greek statue was stolen in 2002, and over a dozen of Chinese artifacts, including bronze mirrors and armor, disappeared in 2004. Most recently, in 2023, it emerged that hundreds of items were lost over the years due to poor management. For other masterpieces that the UK stolen from Greece, Ghana, Ethiopia, and other global south countries, it's never too late for the British Museum to return them to their motherlands. And that is all for today. Thank you for watching this episode of China Currents. If you have any thoughts or comments about our show, please reach us at the email address below. We look forward from hearing from you and see you next time.
We will go for a very short break, but we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to China Now. In this second segment, we have Thinkers Forum with Busani Mkoweni, Director General of the National School of Government of South Africa. That way, Director of the Center for International Security and Strategy, Chihuahua University, and Bidon Singh, Director of the BRICS Institute in New Delhi. Let's have a look on their topics.
Let me start by saying that, the motto of our foreign policy, or the theme that has carried out over the years, is that of building a better Africa and a better world. And by that, we mean a continent and the world that is at peace, where people can coexist, where they will pursue the common interest of developing our economies, developing our regions, and as they say in China, of strengthening people-to-people contact.
As all developing countries.
Just recently, when President Ramaphosa was in charge of the AU, the African Union, when he was elected to lead the African Union, he put forward an idea that the AU must pursue the silencing of the guns. That was the theme that carried him during that period, that we must silence the guns. Because South Africa has a view that countries and regions cannot develop when there is a sound of a gun outside. It scares people, it drains resources, it destabilizes communities. And that's a context within which, therefore, South Africa's support for what emerged as a declaration out of the recent BRICS summit has to be seen, because all the interventions made by the leaders who were at BRICS, including the President of South Africa, the host President of Russia, the President of India, the President of China, in fact, we're speaking to this idea of silencing the guns, because there's a greater benefit in the silencing of the gun. But you must remember also that South Africa itself achieved freedom eventually through negotiations. And that is why the President Ramaphosa has been arguing over time that there could be a peaceful resolution of conflict. You cannot have a peaceful resolution of conflict if there are people who are relentless in sabotaging efforts for peaceful negotiations and resolution of conflict, if there are people who are arming and supplying deadly weapons, as we see in the Middle East. We have always argued as South Africa, all our presidents, that Palestine and Israel, both of them need to coexist peacefully, side by side, with the full right and sovereignty for the state of Palestine, that the existence of the other does not negate the other. That is a basic belief of the South African government, and all its statements and activities must be seen within that context, from President Mandela until President Cyril Ramaphosa, that you've got to silence the guns and that you can settle that dispute peacefully, and that it could have avoided the genocide that is currently unfolding. You will be aware that our president, together with other African presidents, even embarked on a mission to engage the presidents of Russia and Ukraine, where they were pursuing this idea of a peaceful settlement. So across the terms of government, across all the heads of state, if you read their statements, there is continuity in what South Africa believes in terms of peaceful resolution of conflict, in terms of silencing the guns, in terms of transforming the multilateral system, in terms of shifting the agenda from hegemony, from bullying, from abusing smaller nations, to shifting the agenda to focusing on national development, on regional development, greater and fair trade across the world, strengthening people-to-people contact, and making sure that you take care of the ecological concerns, which is one of our preoccupations right now. Yeah, I have a theory that what is emerging in the global south is a counter to what we have seen as an exercise of statecraft from North America and Western Europe. Over the years, they have exercised what I call hegemonic statecraft, where they use all the resources at their disposal to impose themselves, to be hegemonic, to rule and dictate the terms to the people of the global south in particular. And that results in an epistemic justice, ecological justice, and even democratic injustice. Those are all the injustices that have been suffered as a result of the exercise of hegemonic statecraft. I am putting forward an idea there that the global south, through BRICS, FOCAC, and other such platforms, is emerging what I call developmental statecraft, which is shifting the idea to using the power, to using the resources at the disposal of the state towards developing people, developing economies, taking care of the environment, and so on. And I think it is important that the global south must pursue that idea of democratic and developmental statecraft that is more about human development than it is about human domination, because the hegemony that we see in the global south, which is hegemonic statecraft manifestation, is destructive and delays the idea of achieving human progress, as it were. Hence, I am arguing for this developmental and democratic statecraft that is emerging and consolidating in the global south, that it needs to be supported, and that platforms like BRICS, like FOCAC, and many others are important for that purpose. Well, the example of this exercise of hegemonic statecraft is what we see happening in the Middle East right now. Because in the Middle East, if we were using democratic and developmental statecraft, we will be able to negotiate the settlement of the dispute and create two states living peacefully side by side with full sovereign as democratic states in that region. But hegemonic statecraft dictates that instead of supplying ideas to settle the dispute, arms and deadly weapons are being supplied. That is part of hegemonic statecraft, with the view that if there is human destruction, the destruction of property, you will be able to suppress the aspirations of others to be free. And we know in history that that has never happened. There is no war that has been fought that has settled all wars. In fact, you may settle that war today, but you know that the residual effect of it will linger in the hearts and minds of the people. It is therefore absolutely impossible that the claims of the people of Palestine can ever be extinguished. It is impossible, even if all of them were to be cleansed, as it is happening right now. That is impossible. Ultimately, there has to be this democratic and developmental statecraft that I'm proposing, where that idea must prevail such that the matter must be settled and that countries must coexist side by side peacefully, and the countries must cooperate in pursuit of development of their people as well as their region. And that is what I am proposing as a frame for how we must do the analysis and understanding and pursue the idea of a multilateral system that is democratic, that is inclusive, that is focused on people-to-people contact, on fair and greater trade between nations, where we can share expertise, share technologies, share ideas, and share relationships where nations must do as they've always done, where they culturally share ideas, they marry each other and multiply and break some of these artificial borders that have been put between people because of the pursuit of hegemonic statecraft, where some nations will live in small gardens that have got high walls and they are gated, and everybody else lives in the ghetto. That is what we need to challenge. And in fact, the outcomes of BRICS, if you read the full document, you can see that the concern is issues of peace, is issues of security, is issues of development, addressing ecological concerns, addressing youth concerns, addressing the plight of women, the plight of children, and ultimately advancing the cause of humanity.
Trump's re-election would certainly take a great toll on U.S.-China relations, at least in the short term. For China, Trump's ascent holds multiple implications. However, if we focus narrowly on short-term direct U.S.-China bilateral relations, the impact would be quite negative. Trump is very likely to implement high tariffs. He may also remove China's most favored nation status, as he has mentioned many times. He might also impose restrictions on the economic and trade sectors, possibly limiting U.S. investment. Beyond the economic and trade sectors, he may also restrict cultural and educational exchanges, such as tightening visas for Chinese students. Additionally, some Americans continue to blame China for the COVID-19 pandemic. Trump himself still uses terms like the China virus. All of these would take a toll on U.S.-China relations. In summary, I think he will take several actions. It may be difficult to pinpoint the timing of his actions in 2025. The shockwaves these actions will cause is foreseeable. Once he takes these actions, the Chinese government will surely respond. The intensity of the countermeasures may vary, but I expect a downward spiral of bilateral relations to be triggered as a result. Currently, China and the Biden administration maintain more than 20 dialogue mechanisms. By next year, these are likely to be terminated, or at least reviewed. I expect next year to see fewer formal communication channels between the two sides. The U.S.-China relations may enter a downward trajectory, and it could happen fairly quickly. Of course, you might ask whether it will stabilize after 2 years. For example, a 60% tariff is considered by many to be unsustainable for the country and harmful for U.S. consumers. I agree with that view, but the Trump administration will first need to come to this realization. If there is indeed an impact, because economists have different interpretations, if the impact is significant, it will still take some time for Trump to recognize it. Once he realizes it, he may then make adjustments, but it won't be a short-term matter. So, what I mentioned earlier is my prediction for the next year, which I believe will be quite negative for U.S.-China relations. It will be quite challenging. I describe the relationship between the U.S. and its allies as a tangled ball of string. It's complex. The Ukraine crisis is one of the loose threads being unraveled. This tangled ball won't fully untangle because of the war, but it will be significantly affected. The war will affect how the Ukraine crisis will end, impact U.S.-Europe relations, and also the China-Europe relations. It could even influence U.S.-Russia relations and possibly China-Russia relations. In other words, a round of power reshuffling will emerge. Of course, when I talk about a reshuffling, I don't mean it will be complete. A complete reshuffling won't happen. There won't be a U.S.-Europe split, nor a close Sino-Europe tie. I always mention a range of 10 to 20% when discussing this issue. The U.S.-Europe relations could drift apart by 10 to 20%. Under Trump, and Sino-European relations could improve by 10 to 20%. It's likely something along those lines. Changes in major power relationships are always limited, whether for the better or worse. These changes are not qualitative. For the US's allies in Europe and the Asia-Pacific, the presence of Russia is a fundamental reality. Even if the Ukraine war were to stop, Russia would still be there. In the foreseeable future, European countries do not have the ability to counter Russia on their own. So, despite their strong dislike for Trump, they still have to rely on the US for support. The Asia-Pacific countries, such as Japan and South Korea, are in a similar situation. I can even say the same for ASEAN and Southeast Asian countries. Their mindset is the same, because for these countries, while China has no subjective intention to threaten them, they naturally worry about the presence of a large China. They feel the need for a major power to balance China. Southeast Asian countries are the most typical example. While China maintains friendly relations with many Southeast Asian countries, these countries still hope for the US to balance China in this region. Not to mention Japan and South Korea, which are US allies. So, I'm saying that while the relationship between the US and its allies will loosen, this relationship will not completely collapse or transform due to structural factors. I believe that is highly unlikely. In terms of major power relations, I believe that after Trump takes office, the world will move towards a more multipolar or diverse direction. That is, the US, Europe, Russia, India, and China, right? It's not in China's interest to see the world arbitrarily divided into two camps. The current Biden administration is trying hard to divide the world into two camps, the so-called Western world versus the Eastern world, with China being placed into the Eastern camp. In reality, China's position is quite complex, but the Biden administration intentionally simplifies it for its own agenda. There are now various so-called axis narratives. Both in action and in rhetoric, Western countries are intentionally grouping China with Russia, North Korea, Iran, Syria, and others. This does not reflect reality, nor is it aligned with China's policy, and it is not in China's interest. If you divide the world into these two blocks, China will be placed into that block, and China will be seen as the center of that block. Many in the U.S. consider China the true leader of the other bloc, with Russia merely serving as its facade. This narrative and perception are not in China's interest. After Trump takes office, he will adjust the relationship between the U.S. and its allies. Although I don't believe the U.S. will end up isolated while everyone else joins the China side, that's not going to happen. And I don't expect it. It's impossible. However, I hope that we can move away from the idea of two blocs and towards a more diversified world, where each country has its own interests and values. While the alignment between the US and Europe may still be stronger than that between China and Europe, I hope to see Europe with greater strategic autonomy. I hope Europeans can see that China is not entirely their rival, and that China and Russia are not entirely aligned. I also hope that India can recognize that all countries are independent actors. I believe this perspective not only better aligns with the realities of international politics, but is also beneficial to China's interests.
There are some countries who don't want India and China to be peaceful, especially the people in USA. They have military business. They want to sell their missiles and so many things to India. So they really wish the military-industrial complex in America, they really want another war between India and China. But Indians are like clear, they understand what America wants. So we will work with America because we have many Indians in America, and we have some business and technology and cultural things. But that doesn't mean that we will listen to America. And today, no country wants to listen to America. America is not the same America 20 years back. We don't care what America is saying, really. It's like The world has totally changed, and India can decide, and India has been deciding mostly for itself. In India, we don't have any problem like choosing between one side and another side. No, never, never. We don't have to choose between USA or Russia or China. Why? Because we are not part of any military alliance, first of all. We don't have any military alliance with the United States at all. And neither we have any declared enemy. We have never declared any country as our enemy. India is the only country where we don't have so-called military alliance, or we don't have so-called enemy. We are a very normal country, and we are big. We have huge population. So you can see we have some problem with Canada now. What's happening in Canada is not okay for us because we have many people living in Canada. Same way, China is so close to us, so we always have to deal with China. Not only about border, but we have a cultural issue, we have a business issue. So, in one line, the kind of impact India and China have on each other is much more than in any other two country. I mean, you can say that China, USA, influence each other very much. That's very on superficial, on some technology, but culturally, on the thinking and the mindset, on the thinking, the Indian impact on China and Chinese impact on India is very high. It's there for millennials, for many years. So just for border, just for some economic and other issue, I don't think India and China will stop talking to each other. Our foreign policy is our independent foreign policy. Nothing to do with America or Russia or China. So we are dealing with China one to one, our interest, our national interests. So you don't have to bring America between India and China. The two biggest question now today is many people doubt that the rise of China will not be peaceful. And what will happen when China and USA go for a new Cold War, it will have a big impact on the world. At the same time, all the Chinese friends, they ask one question: why you Indian guys trust America? Why you go with America? The reality is not true. We never like America. We never like America. But in USA, after COVID-19, they just opened the green card. 200,000 Indians, they got green card just now. Okay. So the Canada, Australia, America, they have huge land. And, in India, our land is very little. My house is very small. So, so people want to have good life. That's why they go to America, but they don't become Americans. Indians, they still follow Indian life, Indian food, Indian culture. But at the same time, we also don't have any basic problem with United States. We don't have any issue. 2 days back, they sanctioned our 20 companies, 19 Indian companies, for supplying some material to Russia. We are just like China, Iran, Russia. India is also used to American sanction. We don't care it. We don't care it. Let them sanction it. We don't care. So the next president of USA will be very important for world peace. And every country has its own choice. So the next president of USA should be a peaceful president. What's happening in Russia and Ukraine, this war, or what's happening in Israel and Palestine, in Middle East, the main issue is the US policy, right? If they want, they can stop it, but they're not stopping it. So whosoever will be the next POTUS, Indian foreign policy will be like expecting that stop the war. The very first thing, first stop the war. That's the first condition, because in any war, it's the innocent people, the women, the children, it's very harsh to see. So it's the time that we should ask United States of America to stop supplying finance and weapons, and let's get back to the negotiation table. And we also don't want something like what Trump did in December 6th. You have to, if you say you are a democracy, you have to accept the result of public voting. You can't say, no, I can't. The same thing was done by Hillary. She said, no, I don't concede the defeat to Trump. So the Americans, they talk something, but they do something. They have double standard. So inside America, it's no more safe, It's very unsafe, the country. If you're out in the night, you don't know what happens to you in America. So it's no more the American dream, So let's see what happens. But I wish America gets back to normal. It's good for all of us.
And this was another episode of China Now, a show that opens a window to the present and the future of the Asian giant. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.